So it turns out the 2020 election was the most consequential election of our lifetimes. You assume Joe Biden was incapacitated and couldn't change much. Well, true, he is incapacitated, but the people behind him most definitely are not. They are more ideological and more aggressive than ever. Now it turns out among those people is our largest and most heavily armed federal law enforcement agency. That would be the FBI. The FBI is not allowed to insert itself into domestic politics. That would violate the U.S. Constitution. It is completely illegal. But for several years, it has become increasingly clear that is exactly what the FBI is doing, actively working on behalf of the Democratic Party, mocking the rule of law, subverting our democracy from within, far more effectively than any foreign government ever could.
Who does that?
If that sounds like an overheated claim, and it definitely does sound like an overheated claim, unfortunately you should know, weeks before the 2020 election, the FBI pressured social media companies to kill the story of Hunter Biden's laptop. Why? Because that was a story that might have prevented Joe Biden from becoming president. That happened. And we know this not because the New York Times investigated it. They didn't bother. They didn't bring you a special report in yesterday's paper giving you the details. The New York Times would never do that, even if they knew it to be true, and they may. No. We know this instead because Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook blithely admitted it, almost parenthetically, during an interview with Joe Rogan. Watch this.
There was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post.
Yeah, we have that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. Basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
Oh, so Zuckerberg, just to be clear, you just saw it, but let's just unwind what we saw. Zuckerberg was asked, why did you censor the story about Hunter Biden's laptop? And he said, some folks from the FBI came to us and indicated there was about to be a dump of Russian propaganda. Now, there's some rewriting of history going on in which some are claiming, some at Facebook are claiming actually, that the visit from the FBI had nothing to do with the Hunter Biden laptop. But the answer you just saw was in response to a question about the laptop and the censorship of it. And the answer was Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation. Neither of those terms has an agreed upon meaning. They don't actually mean anything. What's Russian propaganda? Is it true? That should be the only question that any news or information company, including Facebook, ever asks. Is it true? Truth is the defense. No, it's Russian propaganda. Again, a term without a meaning. So we wanted to know more. We reached out to Mark Zuckerberg after that interview, and he responded to us, to his credit. Zuckerberg confirmed that the FBI didn't put any of these warnings about Russian disinformation or propaganda in writing. Oh, well, of course they didn't. Nothing in writing. And that makes sense. If you're the FBI, you wouldn't want to put that in writing because you were, of course, lying. At the moment the FBI was warning Facebook about a propaganda dump that obviously would include Hunter Biden's laptop, they had Hunter Biden's laptop in their possession. So they knew perfectly well it was authentic, as anyone who looks at it does. We have looked at it, and it's instantly obvious this is real. And of course, we now know conclusively it is real. So that laptop was not censored because it was propaganda, whatever that means. And by the way, the FBI should never be in the information control business anyway. It was censored because it might hurt Joe Biden. And the FBI is the government agency that pushed for it to be censored. Has that ever happened in the United States? Ever?
No, never.
That is the definition of police state behavior. A government agency independently decides it's going to determine the outcome of a supposedly democratic election. So why is it nearly 2 years until we learn this? Well, it turns out Facebook is a very political place. The founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, paid hundreds of millions of dollars to affect the outcome of the election. Famously, we've reported on that. And then, of course, they were Democratic Party operatives working within Facebook. So on October 14th, a Facebook communications official and former Democratic Party operative called Andy Stone claimed that Facebook was censoring this story because of Facebook's, quote, standard process to reduce the spread of misinformation, whatever that means. But that was their initial explanation. It wasn't until late October that Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of the company, publicly mentioned the FBI's involvement for the first time. And here's what he said. We relied heavily on the FBI's intelligence and alerts, both through their public testimony and private briefings that they gave us. He testified to that. But at the time, Mark Zuckerberg didn't mention anything but the FBI warning Facebook about, quote, Russian propaganda specifically. Why didn't he say anything? That's odd, because in October 2020, right before the election, weeks before a presidential election, every media outlet in the country and then candidate Joe Biden himself were using the very same line. It's Russian misinformation. It's propaganda. And, not surprisingly or coincidentally, dozens of, quote, former intelligence officials were saying the same thing.